Okay, well, hi, Maryam. Thank you so much for being with us on video. We're talking on the morning that Narges Mohammadi, the Iranian activist, won the Nobel Peace Prize. So I think that is connected
Incredible,
to your
incredible
film,
news.
whose
Yeah,
lead actress shares the name Mohammadi. But could you tell us just your reaction to that news?
I'm so amazed and excited that the Iranian women's struggle is continuing to be amplified around the world, and that people realize that I think the struggle for women's rights is really an international one and one based throughout the world. And I'm just so proud to know that an Iranian woman has won. As the women there continue to fight, there's another article in the New York Times of a young 16-year-old girl entering the subway without her head covering, and she came out in a coma. So young people
Oh,
are continuing to fight there on a daily basis, and I'm in awe that they're doing it. I'm in awe that the world is supporting their battle.
absolutely. I mean, it's inspiring. And
Come from a long line of badass Persian women, I like to say. It didn't start
Exactly.
yesterday. We have to thank our grandparents.
No, absolutely. That's what your movie teaches us. And then you made a film called Circumstance, 2011, which dealt with a lesbian couple in Iran. So could you talk about that film? And then along with that, I just want the audience to hear about your own background. I believe you were actually born in the U.S., but you're Iranian American.
Yes, I mean, my background is I'm born in New York City.
Mm.
I spent my summers back and forth to Iran, and during second grade, during the Iran-Iraq War, my uncle was killed in the war. So I moved back with my mother to school to Iran, and I went to second grade in Iran. And that's what you see in the film, where I'm navigating being hated in America after the hostage crisis, for being an Iranian, and hated in Iran for being an American. So I was always the translator of cultures. I'd always tell oh, that's not the way it is. It's different than what you think. And I always thought that the way that transgressed all national boundaries was music. When I would smuggle music in from America to Iran, and then brought Iranian music back to America. But my background is I was not intending to go into film. I didn't even know you could be a director as a woman. I had never really seen any female directors. I thought the person that did Big might be a woman. I think that was Penny Marshall.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And that maybe was the only role model I had ever had. But I think when 9/11 happened, I was actually in academia. My whole family works like near the towers. I couldn't get in touch with my family. I felt very disoriented, and I felt a lot of the same rhetoric that I had heard when I was a kid in post hostage crisis. And then again, this all came up in all of the post 9/11 rhetoric in the US. And I thought it's time for me to go into media. I didn't want to be a journalist. I wanted to move people emotionally. I wanted to show people maybe like the same second grader that, we're not as different as we think we are.
Yeah.
And this film is the culmination probably of my career in many ways. I've made 3 features, two narrative, 1 documentary. This is my 4th feature, 3rd narrative feature. But it is a culmination of why I went into cinema, which was to show the nuanced portrait of people from our part of the world, and more than anything, to show humanity. And in this film, the Persian version, I did it by looking at my own family story. And I wanted to use humor as a way to break down barriers. Like last night, they had the head of the New York Police Department, who's Irish, saw it at a special screening. And he was like, oh my God, I grew up with 7 siblings in New York City, and I'm Irish, and I felt like it was my family. And I said, that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted someone who was like Irish or Italian or anything to be able to say, hey, this is like my family.
Oh,
All families are crazy.
everybody has families with messy secrets, right?
We all, that's one thing you're guaranteed. Where there's a family, there's drama. Comedy. And then Circumstance was my first narrative feature that I developed when I was a student at NYU as part of my master's program, MFA. And I went to the Sundance Labs to develop that. And that's loosely based on my experience when I was a teenager, when I would go to Iran and hang out with my cousins. And they used to go to all the underground parties in Iran. And they used to always break the rules. And they were really like rule breakers, especially my female cousins. And so that film is set in that space of the youth underground movement in Iran. It's about a group of friends, and two of the girls end up falling in love. But this group of friends is trying to dub milk and dub all these Sex in the City as a way to create revolution, right? Using cinema art to create revolution. Then they get caught, and then their world changes.
Oh, yeah.
And it's also a portrait of a family living under oppression and trying to understand how can you create safe spaces in oppressive environments. So it's, it had a twofold element. All my work has a twofold element to it. And so that was based on my experiences of some of my family that lived in Iran. That also won the audience award. So I was excited to go back to Sundance after 10 years to show my third narrative.
I mean, that's amazing that both Circumstance and the Persian version won the audience prize at Sundance. I don't think
crazy. I was shocked. I was like, no one's ever done that. It's not possible. People can think, oh, you might win. I was like, I don't think so. I don't think that's ever been done. I really was very shocked, honestly, when I was at the award ceremony, and I had a flight to catch. I was like, give me those statues. I gotta leave.
Right. And then, of course, the Persian version also won the screenwriting award, which
and that's very meaningful to me. First, my mother's father was a well-known poet in Iran, and my mom, I like to say in this film, is her own. She was a writer of her own destiny, as an immigrant coming to America. And also I teach writing at NYU in the MFA departments sometimes, feature screenwriting. And it was funny because earlier during the festival, NYU had done this event, and I said, and a lot of my students showed up, but I had never met them, right? Because we had only ever done Zoom.
Oh, on Zoom, yeah.
Because that's normally I can't teach because I'm always traveling, but I was able to do it on Zoom during the pandemic. And I said to them, I apologize. This film has all the things you should never do in a film. It has children, it has time periods, it has time jumps, it has animals. It has all the things they tell you never to do, but I guess, there's sometimes you have to break the rules.
One thing I did want to ask just about your background, and before jumping more deeply into this film, I'm a film programmer, and I read that you went to a film series in Chicago that what's now the Gene Siskel Film Center did on Iranian film, and that was important. So I'd love to hear about that.
So when I was a student at Northwestern, even my first year, my compadres taught me like go into the city and watch foreign films, and that was so much fun. And then I got into Shireen Nishat was showing her work at the Art Institute, and that was their short films, very beautiful. I was very blown away by that. And then I had found out there was a series called Films from Iran, and it's funny because years later my documentary would open that festival. The Color of Love. But I went in not knowing, and I love films, so I bought a cinema pass, and I was a student, and they would sell little sandwiches, and I would sit there all day, literally every Saturday, Sunday would be like a month-long event, and I would sit there all day and watch the films. And it was in Persian. It was so exciting for me. And it was the only time I had ever met a female director. They had brought 4 of the directors, and 2 of them were from Iran. 4 Iranian directors, and 2 of them were women.
Amazing. 2
of the 4 were women, and I was amazed. I was speaking to them. I had no idea you could be like a woman director. Yeah. And I was thinking, wow, they work under the hardest restrictions, and they're really breaking the boundaries. So it kind of planted a small seed in my brain that wouldn't flourish for a few more years. But even the idea that that's possible, it's interesting how you need those moments when you're younger. And I think being in Northwestern, being in Chicago, being in that environment was really important for my development as an artist. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know I was going to be an artist, but I think it was the deep background before I became a filmmaker.
So, ever since I saw your film, the Cyndi Lauper song "Girls Just Want to Have Fun" is like in my head.
They're releasing the Persian version next week, so it's going to be fun.
Yeah. So tell me about the way the movie ends with that version of the song. It's so enjoyable, and it captures what the whole movie is like. And when you think about Iranian film, I think most audiences don't think about movies that are that exuberant and filled with color and music. So could you talk about that, like your approach to telling the story, which is very personal and very serious?
Well, I want it to be
exuberant. Yeah.
I want it to be a portrait of who I am. I don't fit in Iranian cinema. I've been told by different programmers around the world. Oh, you're not really Iranian. Oh, you're not really American. Sometimes they have a problem like how to program me, And I said, well, that's exactly right. I'm kind of a mix of all these things. So when I was thinking about how to make the film in terms of formalistic approach, I knew that I wanted, so essentially in the film, you have three narrators, right? You have the daughter, who's my life, essentially, and then you have the mother, and then you have the grandmother. And so they each have very different personalities. So I really wanted my character to be more like 80s, 90s pop. I wanted the grandmother, because grandmothers tell really tall tales, that it would be like a spaghetti Western. And then I wanted the mother, who is much more, like influenced and grounded in her past, to feel more like a neo-realist film, maybe that you might see of Kiarostami or Makhmalbaf. So they have three distinct visual forms, essentially. Right. But in terms of the last sequence, I wanted the first time we enter Iran, you see it in the beginning of the film and at the end of the film. It's the same sequence repeated. I wanted to show that even so in the film, I'm smuggling tapes, which I did in my underwear for my family. And then I arrive into my grandparents' home, into the courtyard, and everyone starts dancing to the music. And if you see, there's a very big juxtaposition between the airport where they're being interrogated. It's very like monochromatic, and then all the beautiful colors of the family home. And that's, it's so, and you see that again in like when they're in Brooklyn and they have the family party. It's like, I want to show that we create spaces of joy no matter what the difficult environment is. And I want it to be very saturated and fun and beautiful and upbeat. And you've probably never seen an Iranian film that ever ends upbeat.
I can't think of one. No.
I challenge you to think of one.
Yeah.
But I thought, for me, it was really important because so much of the film is also about reconciliation with people that we don't necessarily agree with 100% in our families. And, on purpose, the mother is made a bit unlikable early in the film because I want to strip away the layers of who she is and who anyone is. Anyone is a complicated human being. You can't judge them because of one philosophical thought that they have or one thing they've ever said. So I think it was important for me to challenge the audience, to start with you don't like and then end up loving her. And I think, in the end, I hope people like call their parents or call their siblings they haven't talked to in a while, because we're different, but there's still a way to come together in our difference.
The relationship with the grandmother is so interesting, and that's not your typical grandmother.
That's actually my grandmother for real.
What? Well, I'm sorry, that is your grandmother for real?
No, I mean the way she talked. It was she was such a spicy lady.
Yeah, no, that was interesting to see.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because the actress, originally it wasn't that actress to play her. I had to replace her because the previous actress was really judging the character. She said, oh, she's saying all these things. It's so shocking. And I said, oh, okay, I don't think we see eye to eye in how to play this role, because why is it shocking? Because she's an older woman. Like you're not allowed to have sexuality or opinions and when I brought Bella Warda, who plays, she's a very well-known like theater actress from San Francisco, she's Persian, she immediately took to the role because she said, we never as older actors get to have any three-dimensionality. We're just become these bland grandparents or these archetypes. We don't have any inner life. And she's like, I'm still married. I still have sex with my husband. I love that this character is vivacious. We don't see it. So, and I loved her approach with it. And she's such a incredible actress. I think she really brought it.
Yeah. I want you to just talk a little bit more about the sexuality in the film, because the way that fits in with Muslim culture and Iranian culture. Want to hear like how unusual, I don't know how unusual that is or what the ramifications are.
Well, I don't think anything's unusual. I think they say 10% of the population. I don't think it matters what country you're from.
Right.
I think more like the film is exploring that sense of changing cultural mores and what's acceptable, right, as we come to a different country, and as we try to maintain who we are in the old country, but still evolve with the new cultural norms of a new place, and I think that was a struggle for the mother and I think Layla is someone who pushes the mother to come out of, in some ways, the past and enter the present space that they're in, the world that they inhabit. And I think this is a hard thing for a lot of immigrants. It's like when you come to this country, even I speak Persian from like the 60s in a way, because my parents came in 1967 and our language froze. It didn't develop. Like language changes, right? Words change, usage changes. And when I speak, I was recently in Berlin, I ran into some artists and they were like amazed. They're like, oh my God, you speak like my grandparents. Like you don't speak like the modern day Persian. And it's because when you come to a country, you try to preserve your culture at all costs and you freeze it. You don't allow it to evolve. And I think part of the dichotomy in the film is to like, can you preserve your culture and also evolve with it? Can you change? Can you still retain what's important of your past culture and embrace the new mores of your new country? So I think that's, I mean, in a way, I mean, that's real to the storyline, but it's also, it's more of a philosophical question of the film.
And then in terms of the layers of the film, I mean, the film is so much about being an immigrant in America. There's been a lot of movies about different groups coming to America. It's hard to think of one that deals with Iranians, you know, so I think that's new, you know, a new thing.
I always want to do a film. So I've seen films about, like 𝙀𝙬𝙀𝙊𝙍𝙀's done a film like about her life in America, in Brooklyn. There's been obviously many films. I even made films about overseas about Iran, but I had never felt that there was a film that, you know, bridged those two together. You gotta, you know, blame The Godfather for that. My obsession with bridging the two worlds. But I thought it would be interesting to understand, you know, as an immigrant, to understand really truly where we come from as part of our psychological state of our trauma, and analyze that in some ways. Because we're a continuum of our family, right? Our family histories, they don't begin, although like my mother wanted to begin anew. So her story, you know, restarted when she came to America. It was a clean slate. And I kind of, you know, I made that more messy by going into the past. But all of our families have passed before they came here.
Yeah. And then, you know, another thing is that the film is, you know, deals with the idea of being an immigrant, but it's also a broader look at women's rights in general. And I think that around when your film premiered, Sundance was right in the aftermath of the Roe v. Wade decision.
Exactly.
You know, so oppression is not unique to.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. Yes. I hope that this film is a pro-choice film, because I try to say that, you know, I was even talking to my daughter, talking about, oh, Mom, you know, oh, you were pregnant, you didn't plan me. I said, no, I didn't plan you, but this is the beautiful thing in this country, or at least until that point, is that I had a choice. I could keep you or not keep you. And guess what? I really wanted to keep you. But that's also a choice. Not every pro-choice film has to end in abortion. It has to be a question of having choice. And I hope that that's what the film shows also, that the idea of choice is the essential element of women's rights.
Absolutely. No, it definitely feels like a choice, you know, to keep the pregnancy in the film, not that it's a statement, you know. No,
but it is an interesting way to think about ideas of pro-choice. Can pro-choice also end to you having a child? I think
exactly.
It should. That should also be part of the conversation.
Exactly. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to say, you know, you talked about all the challenges in the film, filming with children and animals and different time frames. So could you talk about
Don't do it.
Don't do it? Well, you did pretty well with it, but you're very talented. But could you talk a bit about what the production was like?
Honestly, I definitely could not have pulled this off if it was my first, second, or third film. And luckily, it was like a later film in my career, and I produced myself. So I had a lot of producing experience. I was producer director a lot of times. It was wildly challenging. We got funded right as COVID began, and we got financing. And then we thought, oh, it's going to be over in 3 months. Oh, it's going to be over in 6 months. And then we were like, we have to just make this. If we don't make it, we're going to lose the financing. We shot in the height of COVID, and that was a huge challenge. As you know, it's an ensemble class. There's 100 speaking roles. So it's a very, very big film. So that was its own unique challenge. And that was just added to the normal challenge of, you know, maintaining, you know, it's a challenge to create different time periods, but also to make it feel intimate. It's an intimate story that traverses three decades, actually really traverses like 4 decades. So that's a challenge as a director. It's like, don't get caught up in always set pieces, which are important to be authentic. But in the end, there needs to be an intimate story encapsulated in that. So the way to maintain intimacy through an epic tale was my hardest feat as a director. And of course, you have all the technical challenges of all those different eras and shooting in mountainsides on donkeys and drones. And it was just a much bigger sort of production than I had ever done. But it was always keeping an eye on the different visual styles and also keeping an eye on, hey, in the middle of all this, you need to have an intimate story too, you know?
Absolutely.
So how do you do that? So you want to create the epic vastness of the beautiful wide shots, but you want to feel connected to an individual character's point of view. So that's in the negotiation that it was a challenge. It was always in my mind. I was always conscious of it.
Was in terms of the intimacy, was your family there at the premiere? And I just want to hear what the premiere at Sundance was like.
Well, as you saw in my movie, my mom didn't like my first film so much. She was like, oh, she came to my first premiere and it was like a huge standing ovation. And I said, Mom, what do you think? She's like, you do this to hurt me. So
great.
Yeah. So in this one, obviously my mom knew I was making the film. She spoke with the actors. I got my family's permission. And she even met the actors right during rehearsal and stuff in Turkey. We shot the Iran sections in Turkey. So anyway, we had the premiere and all my brothers were super excited. So the pro tip here is always cast a better looking version of your actual family. So they're very happy.
Oh, okay.
No, but they were loved, and I couldn't find my mom after the premiere. I was like, "Where's Mom?" She couldn't find her. I was like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And then I went to the after party, and I was like, "Where's Mom?" She's still not there. I was like, "Okay, I don't know. Maybe she hated it. She went to the hotel." So it's like 200-person after party. People are dancing, and I'm talking to my lawyer and my agent in the corner. All these people, and then my mom is a little woman. She comes up to me and she grabs my face. I was like, uh-oh, she's going to slap me in front of everyone. I'm a goner. And she's like, you did us justice. So I'm
nice.
with you. Yeah, I was like, okay, great. Phew. I don't need to see any variety reviews. I'm done.
Yeah, that's your biggest award.
Yes, it's tough.
I'll just as a last question, because I'm sure that people in the audience would want to know, like, will this film, it's being released in the US by Sony Classics, it'll be in theaters, but will it be seen in Iran?
Well, my first film was like the biggest black market DVD in Iran. So I'm sure it'll be, much to the dismay of the distributors, it shall be digitally. These days, I'm sure it's not DVD, it's a digital download. But people always think away. I get a lot of messages of people excited to see the film. I'm sure they shall find their ways. I mean, in America, we release like October 20th and then November 3rd nationwide. And we go to the foreign markets in November, December. But yeah, I'm sure there's always a way. They're very industrious, much to our dismay. I mean, there's pros and cons of pirating, but in this sense, I feel at some point it's really appropriate that it gets there.
Yeah. Well, good luck with the release here. And thank you so much. I really enjoyed the talk, and the movie is such a treat.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Nice to meet you.
Okay.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.